ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome into another edition of Infection Podcast. We cover the very interesting intersection between the video game industry and modern-day politics. You can thank the Democrat Party for that. My name is Nick Craig. You can follow me on Twitter at Nicholas M. Craig or check out our website, infectionpodcast.com. Joining me, as he does always, freshly shaven, Brian with an eye Aldridge. Looking good, Brian. How's it going?
Thank you. It's that time of year.
What the hell does that mean? It's middle of May.
Well,
get ready for spring. It was 93 degrees here on Monday last week. I sat out on the beach all day.
See, but this is Idaho time we're dealing with. We had snow a couple weeks ago, so
yeah, that's crazy.
Hail a week and a half ago. So
wow,
it's one of those. So it's finally getting to where it's warm outside. So I figured I'd shave it off. If you want to find me at Boise Computer on Twitter or at Brian Aldridge on Gab, Getter, Truth Social, and whatever places pop up and go away. So other than that, yeah, shaved my beard, crazy weekend. Hopefully you had a happy Mother's Day.
Oh, yeah.
Had one here. So
some crazy lady on Twitter that stalks me wished me a happy Mother's Day. So, I mean, that's it's always great. I'm like, well, I guess in your screwed up mental illness ridden mind, I guess you probably could think you probably do think I could become a mother.
Yeah, possible. So. I mean, it's probable.
Yeah, in a screwed up mind like that, absolutely. So, all right. Let's jump into this, Brian. We've got some good news. Well, good news is maybe a subjective term, but we've got some news regarding Microsoft and Activision. The first story takes us to the European Union, which I thought was going to be a royal pain in the ass just based on some of their prior things that they have done. And it turns out that the European Union is actually seeming to be one of the most normal groups in here at all. So it was a couple weeks ago we rumored that the EU was going to clear the nearly $70 billion purchase between Activision and Blizzard and Microsoft, but they officially did it on Monday. So that hurdle in the European Union, they approved the deal, and that gives, that says, just looking at some of the details and some of the things on it, Bobby Kotick says that they're going to continue to invest in the workforce and all of that, as we've talked about 2 or 3 weeks ago. There's been this threat essentially to the United Kingdom that, hey, if your regulators can't figure it out, we're just going to pack up our shop and move it somewhere inside the European Union. And, so sad, too bad. We just won't have any employees in the UK anymore. But there's also some updates on the UK regulation side, right?
Well, okay, so the CMA went in front of their, what do they call themselves?
Parliament?
The MPs, so the UK's MPs, Parliament, yes, and they went and defended this whole decision to block Activision Blizzard, and here's some of the things they said, because they were concerned about how it's going to affect the reputation internationally of the UK. Just being we're the people that said no, huh?
If they didn't approve it, it would affect their reputation.
Well, the fact that they didn't approve it.
Oh, I see.
The UK's the prime ministers were concerned about how it would affect their international reputation, and so here's the CMA's response: that the UK has always encouraged, and it's their duty to encourage open, competitive markets. We are vigilant, as it is our duty to be to investments that consolidate an already entrenched market power. And so they challenged that the premise that there would be an impact on international confidence on doing business in the UK, because they feel like they're doing the right thing. They still feel like that they're making the right decisions. They say that turning a blind eye to anti-competitive mergers, that's what that would be if they were to let this go through. So,
but it will have an impact on business if other
and jobs.
If everybody else approves it and you're the only one that doesn't, it will. That is a real concern that that is being brought forward by Parliament, because that's exactly what's going to happen. I mean, it's not a secret.
Yeah. Do you think the nanny state really cares about jobs when it comes down to it, though?
Well, I
don't think of the UK as. I mean, they say they care about jobs, but when it comes to that government, do you think they really push employment? I haven't seen it out of that country.
I don't want
a sentiment.
Yeah, I don't want to speak out of my ass on it. I don't follow UK or politics at all, really. But I just, in general, I would say if you're the you've got a whole pot of people over here that have all said, yeah, this is a thing that we're going to approve. And then you're just the lone voice on the opposite side. Now, some people would say, well, look at you. You're the ones taking the stance and you're being heroic or something. We're not talking about like a murder or like something that's going to have like grave impact on like individuals' rights or anything. We're talking about a company purchasing another company for $70 billion. So being the lone party standing I think there is some legitimacy to it being considered a problem and not something that would look good on the worldwide business community. If you're a business and you're looking to expand somewhere in Europe and your option is a country governed by the EU, which has its problems in itself, let's be clear. I'm not a big fan of the European Union, but if your option is open up shop somewhere in the EU or open up shop somewhere in the UK, and you're in an industry like tech where there's lots of acquisitions and mergers and things happening all the time, I think that would absolutely play into that. Now, I think your question is valid, and I don't have an answer for you. Do they care about jobs? I would hope so, but
I mean, they need people to have jobs, but I think they more care about just having money, and so whatever means they have money coming into the system, that's what they care about. It's no longer, unlike where here, up until recently, it was personal ability and accomplishment, and those are things that you looked up for. When you get to a place that becomes more socialistic, that no longer becomes the standard, and that just seems like that's the place. It's kind of like Paris, where their job markets are just very different than ours, or used to be. We'll see. We're getting more like them, I think.
We should have given a little context in case you haven't listened to the past couple of episodes. The reason that the CMA, which is the UK's equivalent to the Federal Trade Commission here in the US, they claimed that they were blocking the deal and not approving it because of cloud gaming. It had nothing to do with Call of Duty or anything, and not even like game publishing, strictly based on the premise of cloud gaming, which to me seems to be an odd angle to take. And I think we discussed this a little bit. If you could make the argument, oh my God, between Bethesda, Microsoft first party studios, and now Activision Blizzard, you guys own all the video game companies that are in the world. That to me is a stronger, which I admit is a stupid point, but to me that's a stronger argument than cloud gaming. I mean, that seems like such a weak thing to say in an industry that's still so new. Now, Microsoft does have a large share, somewhere like 80%, but I mean, there's market shares that so many different things have that are like that. So it seems to be just kind of a weak argument.
Well, and then they also, this past, it was in the last week, they went through and blocked Microsoft and Activision from buying any shares in each other. So they banned where neither party can move to acquire the other, either as a larger entity or through one of its various subsidiaries without prior written consent from the CMA.
Oh boy!
So they can't hold an option to acquire an option. They can either move on. They can't. They're blocking them to be able to do any kind of interest between each other. Bobby Kotick, he says that he called it an irrational decision.
Well,
and Microsoft's president Brad Smith said it was one of the darkest days in the 40-year relationship between them and the UK. So, pretty interesting to see what'll end up happening here.
Is it safe to say at this point, Brian, that there is no hope and no faith that the the CMA and the UK regulators will change course? They seem to be in for a penny, in for a pound on this one. I'm not sure that I'm not sure that there's any going back on this. This, boy, it's such a weird hill. It's such a weird hill to die on. I really don't understand. I know, maybe, I'll be the first to admit, Brian, maybe we're out of touch a little bit on it. Maybe there's more stuff going on in the UK that makes this a more touchy, pressing issue. But when you've got at this point like 17 other similar regulatory agencies from some small countries, I'll note, but some larger countries, and in your next door neighbor, the European Union, seemingly that deal's going to pass through the Federal Trade Commission here in the U.S. It just continues to be a very odd situation that the UK has put themselves in, right?
Yeah, and I think that it's going to be something where, I mean, if they move forward with this merger, what's the CMA going to do? Honestly, like,
Nothing.
but there's got to be a point where some just quietly done thing. I bet you at some point, if they move forward with it, there'll be just some quietly done thing that says, all right, well, you can do business here. We're going to let it, we're going to approve it and try to do it without being an embarrassment.
So Bobby Kotick, as you mentioned, quoted in regards to the EU approval Monday, quote, "We intend to meaningfully expand our investment and workforce throughout the EU, and we're excited for the benefits our transaction brings to players in Europe and around the world." So maybe that's the first little wink, wink, nod, nod that, yeah, well, actually, we're going to be expanding pretty rapidly because we're just going to move all of our stuff out of the United Kingdom.
Because the government can then go, the UK government can then turn around and look at the CMA and say, hey, look at what your decision, because it comes down to a group of people making a decision. It's not like it's the whole country's
unelected
decision.
Bureaucrats. Yes.
Yeah, it comes down to them making this decision. If you could then have people saying, look, this is affecting jobs, look at how much it's benefiting the EU, that's when it'll make a difference, because you'll have some MP or something make some sort of however they do it in the UK, a motion or whatever it is to push this through and kind of just ignore the CMA. I mean, that could be a very likely outcome as well, if that's an ability they have in their version of the Constitution and everything that they have. Possibly there's a way that they can override this to where, because if they didn't answer these questions to the satisfaction of the MP, then that's where the MPs, I would assume, would turn around and say, well, then let's stop this.
Yeah, and I don't know I know for a fact they don't have anything like a constitution. I don't know if the MPs can override a vote, if you have 2/3 a majority or something, 75%, whatever the number might be.
I know what happened here.
Yeah, absolutely.
There, it's just like, why isn't some group stepping in to kind of push this through like they would here? It's just everybody's like, okay, well, that's what it is. Guess we're stuck with it. It's just the kind of this feeling that I get from all of these answers. I don't see anybody saying, well, maybe someone will step in or maybe something will change. It seems to be they're just accepting this as their answer.
And there might not be a recourse or any sort of thing for them to do. So if that's the case, then I guess anybody that works at Microsoft in the United Kingdom, either update your LinkedIn resume or start looking for property somewhere in the European Union where Microsoft will move all their stuff. Because, by the way, and just for clarity points on this, if the UK doesn't approve them, it doesn't mean that the transaction goes through. It means they just can't have offices in the UK. They'll still be able to sell product there, I believe. They'll still be able to sell product there. They just won't be able to operate as an entity in that country, or at least as those two entities combined in that country. So that decision is not going to stop the acquisition for the rest of the world.
So that's where it'll be, to where I'm interested in seeing how it affects them going forward.
Yeah.
Let's see what the company does, because I mean they could do some interesting things here, or I think it'll get settled some other way, but it'll be interesting to see how far they push this.
It's going to be a huge pain in the ass for Microsoft. Imagine having to shut down your operations in a massive country like the United. I say massive, I don't mean size. I mean from like the standpoint of they have a huge, like Microsoft and Activision are huge presences in the United Kingdom. I mean, it's a huge economic center for them, and to have to shut all of that down and move it is going to suck. But they'll do it.
That's why I would hope there'd be a decision earlier than later, so that it saves them from having to start going through that process.
Absolutely,
if it's going to change.
So so that's that. We'll continue to follow it and get the updates seemingly week by week now. But Brian, diversity at Activision Blizzard.
Well, this is the most important topic.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we should have started the show with this. I can't believe I missed this in the notes in terms of high priority topics. What is the DEI score over at Activision Blizzard, Brian? Tell us.
All right. Well, Activision Blizzard this year, they touted for 2022's diversity progress. Wow. And here's the synopsis that GameIndustry.biz gives. Publishers saw modest representation improvements in 2022, but women and non-white employees love how they just
Everybody else
also left the company at a higher rate. Yeah, imagine if we talked in the opposite way.
Oh, I would not say that on the internet.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, I know.
Imagine if you talked in the opposite way. Like, wouldn't the people be like, "That's kind of offensive"? Well, but we're not supposed to be offended when they talk like this. Hey, thank goodness they didn't hire any
white people.
You know, white men is pretty much women and non-white employees. That comes down to white men.
You and me.
Yeah,
and our audience.
Us guys.
Yeah.
I find that very interesting that they're that blatant. I mean, people. You look back, and I know I bring this up every once in a while, but you look back at World War II and say, well, how did people not say anything when they were putting the stars on the Jews? And you're like, why wouldn't somebody say that's unfair? Or why, you on the opposite side of the aisle of me politically, that is right here is an exact reason why those people didn't say anything. Why don't you say anything? Because you think it's right. Correct? I mean, not you, Nick. Yeah, but the liberal person out there thinks it's the right thing, just like the Nazi person thought it was the right thing to do because it was unfair that all of the Jewish people were taking all of your jobs and all of the good things in life from you, just like they could say that the white men were taking all of their jobs and all the good things from them. It's the exact same argument that they made against the Jews as they're making against the white male. I'm just being a little bit blunt with it. But that's the reality of it. It's the exact same argument in World War II for the Jews. That's why the Nazis, for the most part, did not like the Jews because they blamed them for taking all of their success and causing all of their personal problems.
Yes, and I disavow all.
Sounds very familiar.
I disavow all of Brian's statements. And looking at
right?
Activision Blizzard is big on ESG, this environmental, social, and governance. You've likely heard that acronym before. It's permeating companies. It's the precipice to woke culture. ESG is woke culture, and it's when you essentially are operating your business under it. When it says environmental, it literally means environmental, like tree hugging, nonsensical bullshit. Social, that's when we get into what is our diversity quota, how many of this minority do we have, how many did that minority of group that we have, and then governance is self-explanatory. So Activision Blizzard's chief administrator officer said that gaming is a cultural force, and for that force to reach as far as possible, we must attract and retain a highly talented and diverse workforce and build a welcoming and inclusive workspace. Now, I'll say, in terms of having a diverse workforce, for somebody that is in a creative field, I think that's a good thing. You would when you're doing, I know it's not TV or movies, but you're building entertainment, having diversity there of people from different backgrounds and where different things are attractive in terms of what is popular and what is not. That's a good thing to have, especially if you're storyboarding a script for I don't know, maybe a video game, Brian, where you lay it out like it's a movie. All that's fine. The problem is when you jump overboard on it and you push everything aside and say the only thing we care about is diversity. Whether you're a complete and total moron or not is irrelevant. As long as you fit into category X, Y, or Z, you're good to go. That's the problem with diversity. Inherently, diversity is not let's just say this. Diversity is not a bad thing. It's I don't know that it's ever been a bad thing. But when it is weaponized and turned into an argument, well, Brian, we think you're really qualified for the job, but damn, you just you're a white guy, so we're gonna pass on hiring you so we can hire somebody that's less skilled that checks a box. That's not diversity. That's not the definition of diversity. That term has been hijacked and weaponized by corporations and by essentially Democrats and progressives. It's been completely taken over by them, and it is used. You look up the definition of diversity, and it's not bad. They've taken that term and completely weaponized it and blown it out of proportion. So when you read a statement like this, you go, yeah. But then you see it implemented, and you're like, oh, no, actually, we don't want this at all. We don't want people being hired based on their skin color. We want them based on their moral character and their work ethic and what they would bring to our company, rather than the color of their skin or if they're if there's some LGBTQIAP plus person, which is ridiculous.
Yep.
So that's that.
Here, and I just want to give the final numbers because they did an update after this article was written. They said overall retention improved in the company in 2022, and they achieved a 13% voluntary turnover rate compared to the 17%.
So quitting?
That like retiring, leaving by choice, not being fired.
Okay, gotcha.
Additionally, we're recruiting and hiring women and diverse candidates at higher rates. 29% of all recruits self-reported as women, while 40% of all recruits were self-reported as non-white candidates. So, that's what they're saying is 29% were females or reported as female in the company, which is pretty high. I mean, that's a very high number for a tech company like this. But one thing I will point out is when they go through and they start cutting jobs and things like that, the people that they will tend to keep are those engineers, and they'll tend to get rid of more positions that a lot of females or different not white male for the most part people are holding, right? Not that it's their white male, but that's just been in the past how it happened to have been most of the jobs. Plus they make up most of the company.
Well, what I think to more eloquently wrap up your point, when times are tough and you have to make tough decisions, you have to cut off the dead weight. And if the dead weight is somebody you hired based on their skin color or their gender,
right?
Yes, when that's the only reason you hired them and you're out of money, you have to go, well, shit, somebody's got to leave. And it can either be the person that is really competent and good at their job, or the person we hired
keeping
because
something running.
Yeah, or the
right?
woman that we hired because she's a woman. Almost every single time it's going to be that. Now, I do want to note on these numbers. 29% of all recruits self-reported as women, 44 as non-white. Those two numbers, you can't add those two numbers because there's extensively a lot of overlap there. Because if you added those
apples and oranges.
Well, no, but I'm saying if you add those two numbers together, you'd say, oh my God, 73% of all the recruits were women and non-white.
No, but
there's overlap. There might be women that are non-white that would be in both of those numbers. So it's probably
there's 29% female or women, 44% just weren't white. So how that lays out across, I'm sure they've got graphs or something.
At least 44%, because that's the higher of the numbers. At least 44% of the recruits fit into one of their ridiculous DEI categories. The question is, how much more does it go over that? ESG is really scary. That's what companies like BlackRock do in terms of they do it on a you've got a investment company like BlackRock or Vanguard or whoever, and instead of putting money into a smart growth whatever fund with your 401k or your IRA, they're investing it into something that is green and environmentally friendly, even though it might not have a good ROI because they're trying to meet an ESG quota. That's what makes it such a terrifying concept. It's not good for business. And if it's a business like a freaking company that's managing your money, that's a serious problem. I don't want you playing politics with my retirement. Play that shit somewhere else, not with my Roth IRA. Like take it elsewhere. If you want to do that in your company, I don't care. But you can't do it with my money. I mean, that's ludicrous.
Well, and one interesting thing, they have a full report. So people that are really interested in digging into the numbers, they have a PDF that you can access that just has a lot of interesting information. Well, one thing I wanted to note is up
until
the
splash screen, the cover.
Yeah. If you look at their self-reported as a man, woman, non-binary person, or something else, they have on here. Before it was always 21% women, 79% men for fiscal year 19, 18, 20, 21. And then in 21, you'll notice where all of a sudden, we'll go to page 17. That's where I'm looking.
I was so close.
So close.
Yeah. Just
if you look at this, so the numbers are so consistent all the way up until that point. I mean, they're identical, the same. That's what they've been. That's their diversity of their workforce. And then now you've got people that are something else other than a man, woman, or a neither.
Something else. Isn't that the most offensive thing you've ever seen?
Yeah, well, you're something else, aren't you?
Something else. And don't you love the propensity error? 0.1% and 0.04% are the same as 0.2. I mean, there's no. These are not
I know.
These
Those
should
are the
be
minimum.
a sliver.
That's the minimum block size that you're allowed to put in.
Yeah, in whatever formula in your Excel spreadsheet that you generated this with. Yeah.
So I mean, really, it's an incredibly small. It makes it look, but if you look, they definitely have made some push into getting women or whatever. Who knows? I don't know what they're calling them. Females,
yeah, you can't.
Women.
You gotta be careful.
I don't know.
You gotta be careful with your terminology there.
Yeah. Hey, all right. So, do you want to move on to something else? Maybe a little more exciting or
yeah, what you
more
got?
happy? All right, let's go on to some kind of random stuff here for a minute. Bethesda recently released a 27 map expansion pack for Doom and Doom 2, which I thought was pretty interesting because these has been out since the late 90s, mid 90s, if I remember correctly.
Like
I mean, it's been a while. I know I bought when
Doom came out in 93.
I bought, okay, yeah, because I remember I bought what's that? The game that came out before that?
Wolfenstein?
Wolfenstein 3D. I bought that right like a year before this one came out. So, but I never really bought this one. This one was a little bit too scary for me. I don't think my parents would liked it.
Wait, Wolfenstein is pretty spooky too.
Yeah, but I mean, this one had like demons and all kinds of crazy stuff going in it.
Yeah, Doom's a little spooky. I'll give you that.
Pretty hardcore.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, they're calling it the Megawatt. I think it's the Megawatt collection or something like that, but it's a free add-on pack that you can get this week. 27 maps. So if you're still playing the old Doom 1 and Doom 2, go grab it. Completely free to play. So
nice. Good for them.
Cool. And then
damn Microsoft and their acquisitions and ruining all these companies, those money-hungry, greedy bastards, right?
Yeah.
Call the CMA.
They're not doing anything good, are they?
No,
so do you remember when Amazon was supposed to be releasing a Lord of the Rings MMO?
Yeah, that was like the big thing that Amazon Game Studio was working on.
That was like one of their main projects.
Yeah.
Now that got canceled, and do you remember why?
No,
don't worry if you don't.
No, I don't.
So it was because of some sort of issues, I think, with Tencent. Whatever other company that had an interest. I mean, I don't know if it was Tencent or NetEase. They had an interest in it, and they're working together on it, and then the whole thing kind of fell apart. And then they dropped the whole project, and now we've got Embracer Group coming with Amazon Games, and they're going to redo it. So I think probably because of contracts and everything else, and maybe whatever issues, they couldn't continue or move forward with the other one, so they started all over. So they are going to be making a Lord of the Rings MMO, which I'm all for that, especially for old IPs like this, where there's a lot of lore and cool content and things that you can find. There is kind of one,
Daybreak
but
was
the one
making
is
one.
Daybreak runs it.
Yeah.
So I mean, the thing hasn't been updated. It's kind of like if you love the old '90s, early 2000 graphics.
Let's see.
It's not quite that bad, but it's definitely a dated. 15 years old. I think.
I wonder if they shut it down.
Yeah, because there's licensing.
It's not on their website.
It was called Lord of the Rings Online.
Yeah.
Latro.com.
Yeah.
So they're still up. It's been out since 2007. So I mean, this is definitely an old game. That's been the real competition. I mean, it's an MMO. People, I assume, are still playing it. I mean, I played it years ago, but I'm pretty sure it's got to still be owned by Daybreak.
Yeah,
it's Daybreak. If you go to the Latro.com, you look at the bottom, it's still got all their stuff.
Interesting. It's funny if you go to Daybreak's website and you hover over games, it's not listed. Yeah, they are still updating. Look, they were doing an update 3 hours ago. They put a comment out on the old Twitterverse about that.
So it's still out there, but it's so dated, and it's kind of like the other Daybreak games. It's just
you're gonna tell me that this game is dated?
Yeah, that's how it feels. It's 2023, right? We can do better than this?
Yeah, probably. Well, and Daybreak is just keeping it. They're just keeping it
live.
They're keeping it
Breathing.
live. Yeah, exactly. They're not
It's on
actively
life
like
support.
making it. Yeah, and all like that. Yeah, this game came out in 2007, so you're talking about a game that's approaching 15 years old. Which is a problem.
Well, in the older one, so it was Tencent acquiring Lulu in 2020. That's the reason they had to cancel it in 2021. Was because of that whole issue that happened there. So they've started over. Hopefully, I don't know if they can use anything from the previous stuff of it, or if it's totally from scratch. Hopefully, it's better than it would have been with this new company. So I love big games. So bring them out.
Well, this would be a big thing for Amazon to actually do, because there's been a lot of questions whether, and I know they've got 2 games out right now, but there's been a lot of questions as to whether they can grab a foothold in that industry. And I mean, you're talking about an industry that, not to prove any point that CMA is trying to make about competition, but an industry that you can't just randomly jump into as a large developer. Now, yes, anybody can do an indie game, but if Brian, you couldn't just decide, I'm making a Lord of the Rings game. You wouldn't be able to afford the licensing. They wouldn't work. They wouldn't even look at you seriously. So this is a pretty big. This would be a big thing for them to actually develop and bring to fruition. This would be huge for them.
Well, in an MMO, to have people really invest in an MMO, they got to feel like it's going to be around. Because look at how much time people invest, even in Ark, WoW. People put major hours into these things, and so if you're going to get people to really get into what you're calling an MMO, they've got to feel like it's going to stick around for more than a year. Because if you're putting in hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours.
Yeah. What is their current MMO that's out? I know that they have Lost Ark, and that's not an MMO, that's an RPG. But in terms of... Go ahead.
So you're talking about the New World. Are you talking about New World?
Yes, I am. Yeah. That's their MMO. So taking a look at New World right now on Steam, which is an MMO. I mean, they've got a decent player base on it, Brian. They've got just shy of just over 13,000 people playing it. They are averaging about 18,000 in a 24-hour peak. They're coming close to cracking 20,000, which isn't the worst number in the world. So they've got some people playing, and then if you look over at Lost Ark, which is an RPG that they make, this one is very popular. This is with it very much in the top 10 on Steam games constantly. So it's not like their projects have been failures, but for an MMO, 13,000, it's not a bad number. I'm not trying to say that, but
no.
You need more than that to have a long-term sustainable MMO. I mean, at one point, Daybreak or Blizzard had a million plus active players pretty recently, within the last 5 years. Those are the kinds of numbers we're talking about for a major MMO. And I don't know that that's 13,000.
Yep. Well, we'll find out. And right now is a tough time to be bringing out an MMO because we've talked about the things with the economy happening right now. Let's transition to that because I want to talk a little bit about how currently CD Projekt Red is laying off a whole studio, and it's a studio they acquired a year ago. This is something where they were going to be doing. It's Molasses Flood was the name of the studio, and it was 29. There's 29 employees, so it's not like a huge section, but because of the economy, they pretty much shut down whatever they were working on, and they've been laid off. So just another kind of mark for the current state of the economy. It's too bad. What can you do? Especially with these, I'm just surprised they let them all go rather than trying to put them into maybe different departments. But maybe it's because of their location. They if they're located in a certain place where it just isn't feasible to get them all to another location and they want to shut down, then I guess that's how it works because they're in Europe. So it's, states are like countries over there. And so you can have it to where people are just, a couple countries away, but that doesn't mean that you can sit there and move them across back and forth. So
is that where they are? They're in the UK?
No, Poland is, well, CD Projekt Red is in Poland. I was looking for where
It looks like they're in
Molasses
Boston.
Studio. Are they? Okay, yeah.
It says their metadata on their website is Molasses Flood is a CD Projekt game development studio located in the greater Boston area. They're a relatively new company. They were only founded in 2014. So they're relatively new. And they are now they're gone. Wouldn't be surprised to find out that the big city Boston real estate market didn't have something to do with it either, depending on where they were located.
It's getting tough right now. The cost of houses are super high, and so people feel obligated to have a certain level of pay. It's not a good place to be in. Places sales are low. I mean, just look at Ubisoft. They did their report, and their Q4 sales were half of expected. More than
half?
I think more than half. Yeah.
Oh, that's awful. That's absolutely terrible.
So the Q4 sales were halved, and so that's totally making them. Who knows? We'll see. Maybe layoffs and whatever else in this company. They've already been doing some, but they're definitely not doing good. So here's a good indicator of the current state of video game sales. Right,
well, to not to track too far off of this, but keeping it on kind of the same tune. I don't know if you saw any of the Disney Plus numbers and some of the stuff that they've released in the last week or so. And it's, all of this stuff is considered leisure activity. Video games, movies, music, television, entertainment is leisure in almost every single case, unless you literally do it for a profession, but unless you're like a movie reviewer. But I mean, unless you're one of those very specific things, it's a leisure activity, and folks are cutting leisure activities. You look at the new Zelda game is out, and we talked about it. Well, then maybe it was last week or the week prior. I looked at it this week. It looks pretty sick. The reviews look great, but damn, Brian, I can't justify $69.99 for a game. It's a lot of freaking money. Yeah. And that's where a lot of people are right now.
And here, it was 56%. So their sales in the fourth quarter were down 56% year on year.
I mean, I don't know how you don't make significant changes after that. It's crazy. Now the whole year, because it's one quarter is a bad quarter is one thing, but the whole year their sales were down 15%, which is a significant number. I mean, you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars to be down 15%. Net bookings down 18%. Net losses. I don't know. The numbers don't make sense on net losses. But it's $0.16 billion is the 15%. So it's $600,000 or $600 million. So it's just not good. And you're seeing it not only in video games but in other sorts of activities as well.
Yeah. All right.
Or other sorts of things that are activities that are not necessary for life.
So let's talk about Roblox then for a minute.
Yes.
Roblox.
I thought this was super interesting.
Roblox is first of all, let's talk about this. Roblox is in the same boat. They are having losses. And remember, it feels like however many months ago, sometime maybe mid last year or early in this year, I remember Roblox was supposedly doing pretty well. They were talking about how everything was going pretty good. But it comes down to they hit record revenues, but they're still losing. Their net loss is $268 million compared to a net loss of $168 million in the year ago quarter. So, their revenue is up 22%, but that's where they're still losing $268 million. It's just crazy.
Well, this whole facade, Brian, of companies that don't have any this is the weirdest thing, and it's been happening in the tech industry for 20 years. You've got these companies that ostensibly don't make any money, yet have crazy profits and have crazy staff and user bases. And it's like all of this stuff is just, it's not made up. It's all real money. But this stuff is just so fabricated in the way that it's set up. You look at we talked about Vice News last week, I think, and how they they are out of business now. They were valued at $1.5 billion like 3 years ago, 4 years ago.
Yep.
And nothing has changed. They still produce news. Like, they're not a physical manufacturer where it's like, hey, Brian, we make this widget and now we can't make this widget anymore. So now our company is not worth anything. We have no value. They write articles and publish them online. And you go from being worth $1.5 billion to essentially nothing in a couple of years span of time. It's like none of this stuff has any intrinsic value. And it's super weird.
Yep.
Like Twitter.
Yeah. And
Elon Musk was on, I was watching him before the show. He was on CNBC. He was doing a live interview with David Faber. And they were talking about the numbers on Twitter. And he said, they were talking about the financial status, about how when he took it over, they were, 2 months away from bankruptcy. And he goes, no, it was way worse than that. We had a cash revenue of minus $2 billion, and we owed $1.5 billion. So right off the bat, you have $3.5 billion, two that you're going to lose, 1.5 that's already gone and you owe back. And it's like, holy shit. Like, this is a disaster. And all of this on one of the most used websites in the world with an incredibly high user count and user base. Gone. It's amazing.
Exactly. Twitter's the perfect example of once the curtain was lifted and you just saw what it really was. That's an example of this. There's a lot of money happening, but what's keeping it afloat? The wrong situation could sit there and cause the whole thing to tank because they don't have any real money. Everything is at a loss. There's no real money here. So,
well, it's real money, but the expenses just don't make sense, and they're so ridiculously
You're
high.
Constantly losing. Like, something's got to be figured out. I don't know how they are losing so much money in a game like this.
Well, they do it because then they go back and get seed investors. They go back and get more seed funding, even though your company is making $1 trillion a year, some ungodly amount of money. You just go back and make it. I think this is the end of this clip right here. If we can play this briefly. This was Musk. I think this is the clip I was watching. This was Musk on CNBC like an hour ago talking about the acquisition of Twitter. Let me see if this is the right timestamp. And of course, Twitter video is spinning in a circle. That's always fantastic. Let's see if I can refresh it and get it.
Well, I did try to exit the deal, and they wouldn't let me. They wouldn't let. I mean, it was a funny situation where when I first proposed the acquisition, they said, "Hell no." They adopted a poison pill, basically saying they'd rather die. While at the same time, there was a massive cycling.
You said you were 4 months away from bankruptcy. You're going to lose $3 billion in a year, conceivably.
Negative $3 billion cash flow and had $1 billion in the bank.
Yeah.
A negative $3 billion cash flow and $1 billion in the bank. That's insane.
Yeah. Yep.
That would be the equivalent of you having a mortgage payment of $3,000 a month and your income is $1,000. That is the exact same equivalent. How are you going to pay your mortgage? The answer, of course, is you're not, because it's math. It just doesn't work. But Roblox's revenue is crazy high. I mean, they had $655 million in revenue, right? I mean, that's a crazy number, which is up. The revenue is up. The bookings are up, yet they lost $268 million.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, but who knows? Maybe there's something we don't know about that secret, with Roblox. Like, maybe they're working on something huge. It's going to be released and it's going to make up for all the losses. I mean, there could be something with Twitter that didn't exist. There was no secret behind the door that was going to make it to where everything was good again. But with software companies like this, it could be that they're releasing, they could be developing something like Roblox 2 in the background that's causing a lot of expense, but doesn't have any anything to show for it until they release the product. I mean, that's a possibility in a software company. Sure. That could be very possible. They haven't said anything to that, but if in the end that's the justification, then I understand that. You're losing money temporarily because all of a sudden something's going to be released and make a big amount of money when it's in. Developing software is kind of like that when it's something that has to be a product all released. Developing games,
But only in tech can situations like this even happen. It's just so bizarre. There was another interesting Roblox story as well, and this has been an issue for quite some time. And I believe it's even, Brian, the reason that you don't let any of your younger ones to play Roblox. There's a lot of concerns not only over the game itself, but advertising that takes place within the game. So now there's this group called and let's be clear, I'm not a fan of this group just based on their name, and I'm sure they're just a bunch of big Democrat liberals. But the Children's Advertising Review Unit. And they are taking Roblox to task for what they claim to be irresponsible advertising to children under the age of 13 years old. They're saying that they made sure Roblox wasn't doing enough to ensure that social media influencers who had been paid to endorse the product, so that's YouTubers that are playing the game that Roblox is paying. That's why Roblox is losing $300 million a year, because they're paying these YouTubers hundreds of thousands of dollars a video to play the game. That's not being disclosed. And then there's other, quote, in-game experiences that are being advertised to literal children, which advertising to children isn't a problem. I mean, if you watch Nickelodeon, or is Cartoon Network still around? Or Disney Channel.
Yeah, they're around.
All of those networks are for younger individuals, so it is not illegal to advertise to children, but you want to make sure that you're advertising in an appropriate manner to children. And apparently, according to this Children's Advertising Review Unit, as part of the Better Business Bureau, they are not doing that, apparently.
Yeah, and this is something that, well, if you look at what Epic got in trouble for, it's kind of a similar idea of them taking nefarious ways trying to increase sales. And I think that's kind of what they're pushing at, is they call it being irresponsible in how they're advertising to children. But something like this can cost you a lot of money, like Epic found out, where you're doing something thinking, oh, well, might get a few extra sales doing this little trick, or something might work out here, pushing this, these kids see it, then we'll get some extra 100,000, sales or something. It can come back to bite them. So let's see if it's bad enough. Now, these guys, they're a nonprofit. They've made their own set of guidelines, and they're saying they broke their guidelines. It doesn't mean they're breaking laws. There are no laws necessarily, but there may be laws that they are breaking that this may spur for them to look at.
And the reason that this is such a big deal is because 43% of their active daily users, which they, according to Roblox's own, listen, this number's ridiculous, 66.1 million daily active users, 43% of them are under the age of 13. So let's just say half of your 33 million players a day on Roblox are under the age of 13. So it's literally half of their audience. That's crazy.
Yeah, it is. And I always wonder, when is it going to start to dwindle? Like, that game just keeps growing. And
it's a sandbox,
I understand,
dude.
because initially our kids, they were all about Roblox, and they were at that age and then once I started watching over their shoulders what they were doing, I was just like, no, you're not playing this. There's there's no way to limit anything in here, and that's probably why the kids like it, because their parents can only do so much.
Yeah, that's part of it, and it's the true sandbox. I mean, it's Gary's mod for 12-year-olds or 8-year-olds or whatever, where you've just got something that is constantly changing. There's never any game per se, and there's always something new. Somebody's always coming up with a new game mode for this, a new map for that, a new this or that. So every time it's a new experience, and that's how they've been able to cultivate the audience that they have, the player base that they have, and it's why there's no burnout. Everything's different. It's not, you're not playing Call of Duty or even Fortnite where it's repetition. It's the same battle bus, the same map, changes every once in a while, but the same map, the same couple of drop zones that you might go to, the same concept of the circle closing in. It doesn't have that burnout factor. It's the reason that seemingly 20 years later, people are still playing Gary's mod.
That's true. And one thing I'm always wondering, though, Fortnite Editor, for example, does kind of similar things now, but it requires a lot more resources. I think for Roblox, the thing runs on pretty old hardware. It runs on mobile devices. I think that's what's keeping it successful. I am wondering if at some point that Fortnite editor gets popular enough, is it going to start competing against Roblox? I think
but it's
right
also
now
not the base
it's
game.
simple enough.
Right. So Roblox has always been the open world.
Just Roblox.
Roblox. Yep. Fortnite would have to completely rebrand themselves from what's the classification of? Is it an FPS? I don't even know what you'd classify. It's a battle royale. It's
a battle royale BR. Yeah.
So you're taking a game that is known as a BR. Everybody plays it as a BR, and then you also have this additional sandbox mode. That's gonna be impossible to do. Now I have played I'll admit, I have played a couple of custom game modes, and they're fun, but it's not the main lure to the game. The main lure is either singles, duos, or quad man fights. But I will say the creative games I played were pretty fun. Brought me back to,
and with this new editor, so I'm wondering if, as they make the games more robust, maybe it'll become something that can start to compete. But I just think it's too advanced. They're not going to be playing it on their tablets like you can Roblox. I mean, it's going to be a while until something comes along, because it has to be something that runs on 85% of old hardware that these kids are being handed.
Now, maybe you can answer this for me. If you're playing Roblox on like an iPad, which I think you can do, is it essential? Is it the same game that you're playing if you're sitting on a computer?
Yep, it's the same thing. So
interesting.
That's the difference, right? Until they come up with something else. That's why I don't know if Fortnite editor is really going to compete, because it has to have a computer. They don't have a mobile version that really plays all that stuff yet. And so the thing that'll come and knock Roblox off will be anything that can be run on the old hardware, right? That still is Roblox. I mean, that thing is, if you look at how the game is built, the thing is just rough. I mean, it's not polished, but they got tons and tons of players.
What are the Roblox system requirements? Let's take a look here and see. A computer and hardware. All right. Let's see. System hardware requirements. No, I don't. These are just like, okay, so here we go. We've got a graphics card that supports DirectX 10 or higher. It doesn't give an actual letter. Processor, anything 2005 plus with the clock. So a dual core with 1.6 gigahertz or better will run it. 1 gigabyte of memory. Recommends 1 gig of memory. So anything past like the Vista era. And then Windows 7, 8.1, or 10 for that. And then there's mobile specs. Okay, so they've got, I guess, just the generations of phones and whatnot. That's incredibly low for hardware.
Yeah, Android 5, the thing will run on. I mean, we're at 13 or something is the current. That's what I'm saying. It runs on anything. And so that's what's making this work for them. They can't really sit there and try to improve their game. That's why I think they'd have to make a whole new Roblox too, because if you upgrade Roblox enough, you're going to kill your user base. The parents aren't always going to go and buy their kid a new tablet. Well,
you have
with the current
66 million users. Yeah, I mean, there's no reason to.
Well, there's the old looking towards the future, there's going to be a point when they need to move on to something else.
Yeah. It's the adage, it ain't broke, don't fix it. That seems to ring true when you're pulling in almost $700 million a year in revenue, and you're have 66.5 million active users a day. I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah. It's the don't rock the boat type of mentality in development, because any little thing could just totally mess up everything you have.
Yeah.
So,
all right.
Hopefully that'll change.
We got one final story here, Brian, before we got to get out of here a little early today.
All right. Yep. Let's go ahead and really quickly. Let's see. I wanted to talk about PewDiePie just for a few moments.
Yeah. What's going on with him? The old
I haven't heard from PewDiePie in a long time on YouTube, but he had a Twitch channel that he hadn't used for a long, long time, but it ended up getting banned. I just thought this was interesting because the channel hasn't streamed for years, but then it went live and started streaming episodes of Trailer Park Boys, which is a great,
phenomenal show, one of the best ever made.
Yeah, so they started playing Trailer Park Boys, and now now they ended up getting banned. So they said it was used as a test because Copilot who I think is a partnership, Copilot Media, works with him. They have rights to the Trailer Park Boys content.
Oh, so what's the issue?
And so, well,
if you have a license to stream,
I don't know.
It's your intellectual property.
Well, so that's what happened. But said now there's a new mystery. If after a little over a month of running these VODs, without any live appearance from PewDiePie, that channel was then banned. So it was doing this for a month before, and then of course Twitch will not publicly comment on the reason for the ban or how long it will last.
What a great show!
I know. That's just one where you can just sit there and watch it. After a couple of years, you sit there and watch it over again because it's just hilarious.
I've just been watching clips on like Instagram and Twitter, and it's like, oh yeah, that's a phenomenal episode. The whole thing.
And it was that show was made. It was just like a local, low budget, especially the first season.
It was a mockumentary,
super low budget. Yeah, and a mockumentary that they made, and then it just kind of got popular. These were not Bubbles, for instance. Here's a little trivia. Bubbles. Well, I guess I'll give you information, but you can use it for trivia. He was not originally on the show. He was a friend of some of the people coming to the show, and he threw on those glasses and was doing a funny voice. They thought it was so hilarious they brought him onto the show, and he's one of the most beloved characters.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody loves old Bubbles and his cats. Yeah, absolutely.
and his kitties.
And his kitties. All right, Brian. Good show as always. Where can folks find you on the internet?
Yeah, if you want to find me at Boise Computer on Twitter, at Brian Aldridge on Gab, Getter, Truth Social, or if you want to go check out my blog, biteoftech.com. Of course, if you go to our website, infectionpodcast.com, go to the upper right-hand side and join our server on Discord. If you do that, you can check out our 11 ARC servers we're running, Conan Exile server. We've got some politics news. Also have a show news channel in there to where if there's a link or something you think we need to cover, make sure you throw a link into that channel and we'll review it for the live show. If you want to watch us, you can do that through Twitch, YouTube, or Rumble. Or you can listen to the lower right-hand side where there's a lot of different platforms, devices, and ways to listen. Pick whatever one's the most convenient for you. And then by that time, the show's already been uploaded. So that means there'll be show notes for that particular episode, and there's a video and audio player built right into them, and then links for everything that we discussed throughout the show. So that way, if you're wanting to follow along, maybe see something that you heard on the podcast version, that's a perfect way to do that. Just jump on, and you should be able to access it.
All righty. Well,
if you want to support us, we do have the infectionpodcast.com/support as well, and the support option up top.
Yep, you could do that, of course, and hit us up with a Twitch sub or an Amazon Prime sub here on Twitch. Brian, as always, greatly appreciated, my friend. Thank you much, and we will be back with you next week.
Sounds good. See you later.
Alrighty, folks, that's going to do it. If you want to check out my random antics Monday through Friday, you can check out the Wilmington's Morning News Podcast and all your favorite podcast apps. Check it out at nickcraig.com. Also, as our good friend Brian mentioned, if you missed any portion of this show, you can always head on over to our website. It's infectionpodcast.com. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. Have a great week. We'll see you next time.